eyeballs on. Apologies for the technical difficulties. It's always at these times where I'm going to show Megan the stream here because she's here with me. It's always at these times where our computers decide to reboot and renew and do all of these things that it could have done, last night when I was sleeping.
It's perfect until you need it to really work for you, and then all of a sudden everything just goes crazy.
Right. But welcome everyone. And Meg, thank you so much for being here. I am so thrilled to have the beautiful Meg Heppner with us, guys. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Natalie Cololilo, and I'm the founder and CEO of Happy Healthy Women. And I am joined by the beautiful Meg Heppner, who is a leader within Happy Healthy Women. She's actually a branch director in our South Surrey, BC branch. I had the privilege of meeting this beautiful woman when I was there in November, and I just knew that she was going to play such an integral role in Happy Healthy Women. Meg is also a life coach, and she brings to us today the topic of boundaries. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Meg. And I'm wondering if we can start off by just learning a little bit more about you as a coach and, the types of things that you work with people on.
Sure, absolutely. No, and first of all, I have to say, when I came across Happy Healthy Women, I was like, oh my word, this is what I've been looking for forever. Like I have never had the opportunity to be part of such a amazing group where they're supportive and they're they just work together so well, and everyone is just really beautiful and authentic and raw, and I love it. So I'm so excited. And when this opportunity came up to be a branch director, I'm like, I will take it. So I'm so excited. So I'm a life coach. I became a life coach in 2015. And I work with women who want to make massive changes or transformations in their life, but they really just don't know how. We can get so stuck in our lives doing the same old thing. And the idea that, we could really change things up or make things different can be really scary. And yet we are stuck in lives that are unfulfilled. And we feel like, maybe it's our career or our relationships or our spirituality or our purpose in life, where we just are like, this isn't doing it for me, but I don't know what to do next. So I walk with women as we kind of figure that out. We build that sense of self that you're going to need to look at your life and go, okay, you know what? There's things I'm going to change, and there's things that I'm going to accomplish or do or whatever. And then we strategize how to do that. So my clients, they don't look for the perfect life, but they want to thrive in an imperfect world. And they want to wake up every morning and say, you know what? I'm living the life I want to live, and I love it. So love my
I love that too, and our viewers are loving that as well. And says outstanding. Helena is letting us know she's here, so thank you guys for tuning in. So I absolutely love that, because there really is no such thing as the perfect life. And so, the minute that we can acknowledge that and just understand that it's about us being our best and how feeling our best. And I totally agree with you. And so you help people live the life that they want to be living, which, I mean, is there anything more important, right? Like living in their bliss and living this one life that they love.
Totally. And you don't realize it, right? When you're not doing it, I always call it when you're asleep, when you think your life is good enough, you don't realize that there's something else out there. And when you do visualize something else out there, you think a fantasy world with no problems, right? Which is not what we're talking about, but we're talking about a life that brings you the challenges that excite you, that gives you the opportunities to grow and to become more. And it's out there. You don't have to be stuck. And so many of us just don't realize it. So
totally. So talk to me then about, why you chose this topic of boundaries. Why is it such a big topic in your field of expertise?
Yeah. Well, there's two reasons I adore talking about this. The first is I find most women struggle with boundaries. And it's just this idea that, we're the nurturers and we're the givers, and very often we let our boundaries go. And so I find that because I work predominantly with women, this is an important subject for any type of coaching that I do with anyone. The other reason I love talking about boundaries is it's personal. Like, I spent a huge chunk of my life having the worst boundaries possible. I was brought up, and I think a lot of us were. I had great parents, but I was brought up in that idea that the more you give, the more generous you are, the more you make other people's needs and feelings a priority, the better person you are, right? And so I bought that hook, line, and sinker. And I was like, oh, the more I can sacrifice for people, the more I can give to people, I will be a happy person if I can live that type of life. And the only problem was that's not what happened. I laid down and did what everyone needed, but I was miserable. I was unhappy. And the worst part is I was resentful, right? Like I actually started to resent the people in my life and just realized like this is no way to live, but never thought of boundaries, never thought that that might be something that would help me until one day I was really just studying relationships because I love relationships. I think our happiness in life depends on the quality of our relationships, right? And so I was looking at how I could make my relationships more fulfilling and more authentic. And I just came across this idea of boundaries. And I thought, like, does this work? And I thought, well, I'm going to try it. And I thought, okay, I'm actually going to say no sometimes and see what happens.
Right. And so what ended up happening?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because when people know you a certain way and you've been a certain way your whole life, and then you try to set a boundary, people don't like that. And I didn't realize that. So that was it was a very cute first step in my journey, right? And I look back and I have to laugh because I think I did what most of us do. We have this life where we've served and we kind of get sick of it. And so we work ourselves up into this real like energetic state and we go, that's it. I'm going and I'm going to go tell that person no more. Right. And so that's exactly what I did. I went and I told people in my life, you can't talk to me like that. You can't treat me like that. You can't accept me like that. And I thought, I'm going to gain all this respect and I'm going to gain all this, I'm going to have beautiful relationships because I'm doing this. And that's not how it worked out. People were like, what are you talking about? Like absolutely furious, which is quite funny. And that's when I learned something really important about boundaries. Boundaries are not something you can put on someone else. Anytime you think you're putting a boundary on someone else, that's actually control. So when I went and I said, you can't, that's not a boundary. That's control. And any human being is going to fight against being controlled, right? So even if I was right, it didn't matter that I was right. The fact that I was trying to control that next person made me unsuccessful. So where do you put a boundary, right? What do you do then? If you can't say you can't treat me like that, what the heck is a boundary? What do I do? And I realized a boundary is something you put on yourself. So if I didn't like the way someone was speaking to me, I had to realize the boundary was I don't engage in those types of conversations.
Right.
So it wasn't you can't talk to me. It's I don't engage in those kinds of conversations, which gives me my power back. Because when you live a life where you've sacrificed and you've served and you've done all these things, you kind of feel powerless sometimes. And when you go to someone and you say, here's my little boundary, please respect it. And they don't, you feel powerless. And then once you realize, oh, the boundary is on me, you go, oh, I'm powerful. I have power. I can walk away from this conversation at any point in time that I choose to. I have the boundary on myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Like, and this is so like juicy. Like, this is so good. This is so important. This is so much about what people struggle with, right? And you're so right. Like the minute that we start to try to control other people and say, well, this boundary is that person can't treat me like that. That's, where we start to feel frustration, where we start, like, I can see a whole slew of other issues coming from that, right? Because we're not going to change someone else ever. So This is so important. I love this. So Meg, talk to me about then what are some ways that, you mentioned I don't engage in those conversations. First of all, let's talk about how our lives can look different when we do have boundaries. Like what's the difference between someone's life that has now set boundaries for themselves versus someone who's just continuously running that rat race of trying to please everyone?
Yeah. Well, that's huge what you just said, right? This once you place boundaries around, you actually get control of your life. Yeah. And I think that's huge. And I say that with some hesitation because I worry that people will misconstrue that like, oh, I can control things. Like again, that issue of control. And I don't mean it like that. But what I mean to say is that you're living on purpose.
Right.
right? So many of us go from experience to experience to experience and just feel like, oh, I'm just being taken through life. And when you go, actually, I have parameters, I have boundaries, I have things that I won't engage in, and I have things that I will engage in, you actually start to shape a world that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So your life looks completely different, as in, if I don't engage in certain type of conversations, I don't have certain type of relationships. If I don't engage in certain type of behaviors, I don't put myself in certain types of situations, right? So that's different for every single person, but you find that the big things in life, like the kind of relationships you have, the circumstances you find yourself in, the things that you believe in a certain area of your life, they change when you have boundaries, right? So for myself, like when my boundary is no matter what, I will be a loving, beneficial presence in this world, that changes how I walk around this world. That changes my interactions with everything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
honestly, when people want to change their lives, when people want to make massive changes, boundaries is I would say almost at the top, if not the top thing that's going to make a huge difference for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it makes me also think about like creating the world that we want to create, right? So right now we're sort of in what people are calling the global Sabbath, right? Or the great pause, where we're all sort of at home and we're able to say, oh, okay, we want to live in a different kind of world. And what I realized is when I didn't have boundaries, I was allowing the creation of a world I didn't believe in. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you don't have boundaries, you allow people to step on you. You allow people to speak to you certain ways that are really not beneficial for anyone in the world. Like, I don't stand for voices being silenced. I don't stand for people being taken advantage of. I don't stand, for any of those types of negative things. But when I allowed people to do it to me, I created that in the world. The
Mm-hmm.
very thing that I would say I stood against. So I love this when we're in this like kind of Sabbath, when we're in this kind of pause to go, well, when I go back into the world, for those of us that are at home right now, what kind of world do I want to create, and how does boundaries help that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one of the things that I'm really working through, with a lot of people and with myself too.
Totally. I love the way you think and I love the way you speak on this. And you're making me feel like you're making me see boundaries in a whole new light, which is so why these calls are so amazing. And I think you're incredible. And like this is one of the things, I've always thought boundaries had to do with another person. I considered, I guess, what I did for myself as standards, right? And I guess they're similar in many ways, but I think boundaries always makes me think of there's a stop, right? And so that's a great way to think about how we treat ourselves as well. Listening from Surrey, okay, amazing. So we have some great people on that are listening. If you have any questions for Meg around this, if you are personally struggling with anything that comes to boundaries for yourself, please do share in the chat. And, we have a few minutes here where we can talk to this beautiful woman about this stuff. But Meg, I wanted to ask you, and people are probably wondering this too that are watching, what are some things that we can do to start to get ourselves in the mindset of creating boundaries for ourselves? And would you agree with the word standard and boundaries being similar but not quite the same?
Yeah, they're similar, but not quite the same. I
Okay.
100% agree. A standard is the expectations you have of yourself, and it's much broader, right? Like the expectations I have for myself with what I eat or what I exercise or what I do, those are standards that I have for myself. Boundaries are slightly different. Boundaries, like a boundary, you have a boundary um, when something hits up against a root belief, right? So we all have these root beliefs that we think there are universal truths. They're real for us. And anytime someone will rub up against that, we go, oh, there's a boundary. And very often we know it because we get angry or we get any of those negative emotions, right? So that's when I have a boundary here. And what's really fascinating about that is there's a couple of ways you can deal with it, but one of the most interesting ways to deal with it is to go, what is this boundary saying about me? What is this boundary saying about what I believe, what I value, what my wounds are, right? You can go into some shadow work that's super fascinating. What I desire, like really digging into what is the purpose of this boundary in my life, right? Because very often that's when we start to realize we need to shape new ones. That's when we realize we need to create new ones. And sometimes, like I'll often say, sometimes you get a boundary bumped up against, or you get a root belief bumped up against. And as you dig in, you go, there's no reason for this boundary to be here.
Mm-hmm.
This boundary serves no purpose. This boundary is here because of a wound, or this boundary is here because of an old belief that I actually could get rid of. And I could take a new boundary, which would be much more beneficial for me, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
you can look at boundaries and go, actually, this is huge for me. This is so important. And I need to spend more energy making sure I incorporate this boundary in my life, which brings you to a whole new level, because then you go, when I incorporate this boundary, the biggest thing to consider is, what are the consequences going to be? And am I willing to face those consequences? Because normally, not always, but you'll lose something. And that's often why we don't set these boundaries, or we don't enforce them. I won't speak up because they'll be mad at me and I'll lose a relationship. I won't speak up because then my kids won't talk to me, and blah, whatever the scenario is for you. And so the first thing when you go, okay, no, this is a boundary worth fighting for, you have to say, what are the consequences? What am I willing to lose because of this boundary? Because it will happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yet there's a huge difference between, I always say it this way, there's a huge difference between pain and injury. If you hold a boundary, you will cause pain, and that's okay. Pain causes growth. Nothing wrong with that. We all experience pain, and pain is our little motivator for growth, and that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't stick with a boundary, you're creating injury. And injury means something is broken, right? So let's say you have a relationship with someone, and you have a communication issue, right? So let's say, they don't communicate in a way that's beneficial. Maybe one's a yeller, one doesn't speak that way. Maybe one talks over you, whatever. And you come up to that person and you say, here's the thing, I'm not going to engage anymore in this type of conversation. I love you. I care about you. I want to have good conversations, but I just can't do it like this. I'm so sorry. It makes it difficult for me to be in relationship with you. You will cause that person pain, but that's okay, because now you'll work on your communication. Whereas if you don't say anything, you're injuring your relationship, right? And if you're injuring your relationship, a relationship will deteriorate.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to ask yourself, or you really have to know that boundaries won't end suffering, but you're going to suffer for the right reason now. You're going to suffer for your values and your standards. And that's not a bad reason to have pain in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Boundaries they can bring so much more health and life to something that hasn't been working, or to that injury, right?
Yeah.
I love that, Meg. I love the way that you put that, and that specific example as well. So a couple of ways that we can start to, for the women that are watching, and they're thinking, okay, I need more boundaries, right? Like, life is just a mess. I need to start implementing some of these things right now. What are a couple of things, maybe 2 tangible things that they can do right now to start having this in their life?
For sure. The first is figure out where the boundary is being hit, right? So where's the root belief being rubbed up against? And first, because knowing that is so important. And it's actually not something to just brush over. It sounds so simple, but it's actually the most important thing. Like, what boundary is actually being violated here, right? So sometimes we go, he can't talk to me like that. I don't like being talked to, but that's really vague. You really need to know, what is the boundary? Like, what exactly is it about this thing that bothers me? That clarity on exactly what it is super helpful. And then the second thing is just digging into, what is this boundary saying about me? And in what way can I communicate this boundary in a really positive way to this person? So I think knowing your boundary, the clarity of the boundary, knowing what it says about you, and then being able to say to that person, this is my new boundary, and not expecting a positive response, but going, yeah, I'm going to accept the consequences of whatever this is.
Right.
And then there's actually a whole nother level of boundary that you have to be careful not to cross. And that is, you're responsible for your feelings and I'm responsible for mine. And so once you go through this process, to take a step back and go, now that you're upset, you're in pain, I'm not responsible for that. And it's a whole nother level of boundary that you really have to deal with. So it is a process, which is why I find a lot of women love to come and have someone walk through that process with them.
Right. Yeah.
But definitely clarify your boundary. What is your boundary saying about you? Figuring out a way to say it that really gets your needs across, and being prepared for consequences.
Yeah.
Those are going to be your basic steps.
I love it. Being ready for the growth, right? That's the most important piece is being ready for the growth and jumping in to it fearlessly, and not letting fear or fear guide you, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so for those of us who wouldn't want to work through this on our own, we don't have to, because we have someone like you, the lovely Meg, to guide us through. So talk to me about how you work with people, and obviously, you're in a totally different, you're on the other coast of Canada. So tell us how you're working with people these days, and if we can touch base with you for maybe a discovery call or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. When you said, hey, we're going to do this at lunch, I'm like, oh, breakfast, because we're on breakfast time, which is awesome. Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's a couple of ways that you can experience more of the work that I do with boundaries. One, of course, is a discovery call. You can look me up actually on Facebook, and you can connect with me that way. You can send me an email or give me a call or a text. I will get right back to you. And that is just a one-on-one session where we can see like, hey, what are your goals in boundaries or in anything, and how can we work together, and would my work benefit you? So that absolutely is something that I love to do. The other thing is, if you look online, if you look on Meetup, I am actually running a little self-love course on the South Surrey branch, and one of the topics on one of the nights is boundaries. So you are more than welcome to join us there. We would love to see you. And the other thing is, on the 23rd of May, because we're in May, the 23rd of May, I'm actually starting a group coaching for boundaries and self-love. And so if that's something that you're interested in, again, you can find that on Meetup, or you can just send me an email to get more information. But absolutely would love to work with people, because I know my life has changed, right? I see it in so many different ways. I see it professionally from the women that I work with, but I also know from my own experience. So I feel so connected to the women that come to me and have this type of issue to deal with.
I'm sure. And you are like so easy to talk to that I can see so many of the women in our community really resonating with everything that you're saying. So get ready for calls for sure. Tell me again, what is the website people can find more information on you?
Yeah, for sure. You can just type in meghepner.com. You'll find me there. That's easiest. Okay. And then on Facebook, yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, perfect. That's awesome. You're so it's awesome. I love it.
That is amazing. And yeah, for those of you again who want to check out Meg, so anyone anywhere right now, as you know, everything that we're doing is online with Happy Healthy Women. You can tap into the events that are happening in BC by just going to either our website at happyhealthywomen.ca, or like Meg said, go check out Meetup. Type in Happy Healthy Women South Surrey, and her events will pop up for you. And Meg, I want to thank you so much for being here today. We went a little bit over time, but I think it was totally worth it. You are amazing. I love everything about you, girl. I cannot wait to come and see you again, or maybe you'll make a trip out to TO. Who knows? But this has been great, and yeah. So thank you again for giving us your heart and your knowledge today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I absolutely love you, and I love this community. So I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. And for those of you who are watching who are also, in the field of wellness or health or business or success or mindset for women, please touch base with us at Happy Healthy Women. We would love to have you on board as a leader as well, and shine some light on you, because like Meg, you're likely doing amazing things, and we want to promote you. So thank you again, and we will see everybody very, very soon, I'm sure. Take care, guys. Have a great week. Bye. Bye.